I think that Zelensky was not allowed to come to Israel largely because of how Trump treats him. The current Iranian leadership believes that the interest of its country is the destruction of Israel. If Russia officially supports countries and movements that want to destroy Israel, then we cannot consider it a guarantor of Israel's security. I want to offer you the second part of the interview with Yaakov Kedmi, where he answers your questions. Believe me, as always, it will be interesting and there will be something to discuss. And tomorrow, the third part will be released. Another question related to Iran, but this time, how it concerns Russia. I combined several questions into one. Lev Levitt asks, why does Russia support Iran so strongly in its confrontation with us and the Americans? After NATO failed to fulfill its obligations, the U.S., according to Trump's statements, may leave this bloc with all the consequences. This is an excellent bonus for Russia in its struggle with Ukraine and a united Europe. Could relations with Iran really be more important than victory in the war in Ukraine? Yura Izrashev asks, Yaakov, please tell me, does the Russian leadership understand what the Iranian regime is? If yes, then why does it support it? Is it because of the principle, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? And Pavel also asks, is there a systemic mistake in all of this that was laid back in Soviet times? The last one is correct. I want to explain what is happening. Why did the Soviet Union support Arab countries when they declared that their goal was the destruction of Israel? Why did the Soviet Union turn a blind eye to this? Why, when the Six-Day War began and in all the squares of Arab cities there was one call to throw the Jews into the sea and destroy this state, did the Soviet Union remain silent and support them? This was a state decision, a mistaken one. As I heard from Soviet leaders themselves, later they said, we acted incorrectly. It was a mistake. But it was a decision made based on how they then understood the state interests of Russia. I highly evaluate the intelligence services of Russia and their ability to analyze the situation. They know perfectly well what Iran is. They understand its goals perfectly, but apparently decided that in this case they must support Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah, despite the fact that they openly declare their desire to destroy the Jewish state. The only thing they did not repeat now is the mistake they themselves recognized after the Six-Day War, when they broke relations with Israel, and they were left without any influence on Israel. So you can treat this positively, negatively, or neutrally, but this is the result of Russia's assessment of what is good for Russia. They believe this is more beneficial than other options. This is their right, and we treat it accordingly. And why does the entire Israeli establishment and government, without providing real help, support the pro-Nazi regime in Ukraine? Despite the price my people paid in World War II, despite how many Jews were destroyed by the heroes of modern Ukraine, on the territory of Ukraine, 1.5 million were killed, and they were allies of Germany. This Bandera Ukraine fought on the side of Germany. They served in the SS, they destroyed my people, and today they are heroes. Why does Israel support this? Thank God there was enough sense not to turn this into military support, and that's already good. I believe this is the same mistake and the same moral meanness as Israel's support for Ukraine or the Baltic states, where there are also their own national heroes. And all those who fought against the Nazis are outside the law there. At the same time, in Estonia, 100% of the Jewish population was destroyed, and in Lithuania and Latvia, 98%. So I have always said and always say, politics is the oldest profession in the world, not the one people usually talk about, and therefore through mistakes. In Russia, this has also changed. I recently saw how Soviet propaganda spoke with such anger and hatred about our operation in Entebbe. It was called a violation of Uganda's sovereignty. Idi Amin was not just a monster, he was a cannibal who, killing political opponents, used to say, "Give me to eat his liver alive." The Soviet Union, mentioning the Entebbe operation, modestly did not indicate against whom it was directed. And it was directed against Germans, members of a German terrorist organization who hijacked a plane to Uganda and in German selected passengers, separating Jews from non-Jews. Non-Jews were released and Jews were told, again in German, that they would be dealt with. But Soviet propaganda paid no attention to this. Why? Because it was a violation of the sovereignty of the cannibal Idi Amin. That's how it was. Distortions of facts for political interests. This existed both in the West and in the Soviet Union. Today, we see elements of this in Russia's current attitude toward Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and Israel. Although regarding Israel, it is not such harsh propaganda that would reach open anti-Semitism, which I remember. Back then, I was still in the Soviet Union. And later, after moving to Israel, I saw those statements. Open anti-Semitism exists among bloggers, but not in official statements of the Russian authorities. Another question from a viewer. They write that Zelensky, during his Middle East tour, planned to visit Israel and meet Netanyahu, but he refused to meet him, and Zelensky never came. Did Bibi fear Putin's anger? No, this is purely a matter of psychology and political calculation. Why do we need Zelensky? I think that Trump's attitude towards Zelensky had a big influence on the decision not to let him come to Israel. That's why I think the decision was made. Why do I need this? You won't be able to wash it off later. It will stink all over the world, both in Israel and beyond. This is how this clown is received around the world. Europe pushes him, negotiates his visits. Fortunately, and I think to the credit of our government, that this degenerate traitor disgrace of the Jewish people, even in the status of president of Ukraine, has not been received by us so far. I hope it will always remain so until he ends both his life and presidency in disgrace. Another viewer asks, is calling actions against Iran, the Epstein coalition, a sign of hidden anti-Semitism in Russia? This is a distortion of foolish propaganda. It is not anti-Semitism. I repeat again, official Russian propaganda does not use the methods that Soviet propaganda used, which bordered on open anti-Semitism. This appears among bloggers. That is the price of the relative freedom that was achieved in Russia during Gorbachev and Yeltsin's times. Another question, pilgrims were banned from entering Israel during Easter. According to Mikhail Kazin, this may be because they don't want to show real destruction after Iranian attacks. Is Israel trying to pretend everything is fine while barely holding on? Kazin talks a lot of nonsense. Kazin is an example of a half-Jew who hates his Jewish roots, and therefore he is more anti-Semitic than others. Facts. Mosques on the Temple Mount are closed because large gatherings are not allowed for security reasons. All Christian churches have restrictions. Why? Because Iranian missiles are exploding in the Old City. Fragments have fallen near the Dome of the Rock. Near the Western Wall, there is also no one. Special permission was recently given for a short time for a small number of people to perform Easter prayers and then disperse to avoid crowds. Authorities coordinated with religious leaders to ensure safety. This has nothing to do with hiding destruction. There are many foreign journalists showing everything openly. Another question, an anti-war protest took place in Tel Aviv. Is it illegal? In a democratic state, laws are interpreted by courts. The highest court ruled this is a legal right. People can demonstrate even if others disagree. This is the rule of law. Another question about missile defense. The Iron Dome is only one system, designed for short-range rockets. Ballistic missiles are intercepted by other systems like Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. The effectiveness is over 90%. Most damage comes from debris after interception. Absolute protection does not exist. Another question. What threats will Israel face in the next 10 years? Iran is the only real strategic threat. Without its nuclear ambitions, there would be no existential threat to Israel. Another question about leadership. No one knows who will replace current leaders. Politics is unpredictable. The real issue is society itself and the leaders it allows. Another question about October 7th. The current leadership is trying to avoid responsibility. But the war with Iran is not connected to that. Another question about settlements. They began as political moves and grew into a major issue. This was an irresponsible decision driven by ideology. Final question. What if the U.S. leaves the Middle East? Israel should not rely on any external country. Its real allies are its own army, navy, and air force. The Middle East can resolve its own problems. Many conflicts today come from artificial borders created by colonial powers. We will manage without you. We will reach agreements with the Arabs ourselves.